What did you think, Brady, about, because I thought this was interesting. It is a fine line that we walk when we talk about quarterbacks and how they behave themselves at the podium. We like people to be honest, but then we criticize players when they are honest. And yet it's hard not to get a little miffed at Baker Mayfield if you're the training staff or really anyone, because he appeared to kick them under the bus. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I know he's since come out and apologized. I just think the most frustrating part of this entire year watching the Browns is, Freddie Kitchens, and really it goes higher than that. Jimmy Haslam, D. Haslam, they've continually had a hard time creating a culture that allows players to develop, when to know what to say and do the right thing. And I think it really that speaks volumes as to how this year has worked out. They hire a new head coach in Freddie Kitchens. They're hoping that's going to equate to better play from Baker Mayfield on the field and help him continue to mature and grow. And really, it's done the exact opposite. He's playing worse this year. He's not as good of a player. And time and time again, we're dealing with things with the Browns off the field. It's game after game, week after week. If it's not Baker, it's Odell. If it's not Odell, it's someone else, or Myles Garrett. It's always something. And unfortunately, I think Baker Mayfield was drafted into an environment. Now, I don't think it was similar when I first got there to Cleveland. I really appreciated what Phil Savage and Romeo Crennel had us in, and I think we were 10-6 that rookie year. We're on the right path. We just got crushed with injuries the next season. And once you pulled that ripcord, it really has started a domino effect in my mind ever since then, ever since 2007. And then once Jimmy Haslam and D. Haslam took over as owners, they've never been able to allow a coach to have more than, 2 years since they were there, or 2+, I guess, if you're looking at Hugh Jackson. And so they've never allowed a head coach to have enough time to implement a culture and an environment where, one, players don't say this kind of stuff. I mean, look at the best organizations. You never would find this from any Patriot player, let alone quarterback. Do you see that in Seattle? Do you see that with the Green Bay Packers? Do you see that with the Baltimore Ravens? And so I kind of just I look at a contemporary like Lamar Jackson, and everything he's done since he's gotten there, he's done it the right way, and he said the right things. And I know it's been easier because they've been a team that won the division. He's had more success, and he's had more help out around him compared to what Baker's had. But these sorts of moments of adversity, it's not the time when you throw your medical staff under the bus talking about an injury that it's not your injury. You don't know anything about it. So why are you talking about it? And why are you throwing people under the bus who, trust me, only have your best interest in mind? You don't think the medical staff wants you to win a Super Bowl or win the division and have a chance to doing all that? So, it's one of these things where he just needs to grow and mature and look at other examples of the greats to do it, and stop using this mantra of I am who I am. Because if that's who you are, then you haven't grown and you haven't gotten better, right? Like you're still the guy that, we saw last year, make some outlandish comments at times, or even in college had done some things, and you haven't grown, you haven't matured. And so if you're not trying to get better, and not only as a player, but as a person, as a leader, then you're putting this organization back behind the eight ball, and you're never going to be able to get over that hump. So it's just disappointing. As a former Browns quarterback, as a former Browns fan, or as a Browns fan, watching this team and having high aspirations for them, that's what this whole thing strikes me as. It's just it's an inept culture and environment there that I think allows him to even say things like this. Whereas if you had a different head coach, a different environment, more stability, you're not hearing these sorts of things from players who are in his position.
So Brady, I mean, that you mentioned sort of the pre-draft process with Baker and some of the questions about his maturity. So if you're the new head coach, let's assume Freddie Kitchens doesn't survive for year 2 somehow, even though he's had a great year 1. If you're the new head coach and you're talking to John Dorsey and Jimmy Haslam, what are you going to say to them to convey the message that you can handle Baker Mayfield? Because Baker Mayfield, I don't think had any respect for Hugh Jackson by the time that marriage ended. He seems to have Freddie Kitchens back right now, but who knows if that's going to change. But as a new head coach, Ron Rivera, whoever, what are you saying to ensure that you can, quote unquote, handle Baker, sort of his off the cuff comments and some of the things that you're sort of talking about here?
Well, again, I think it goes back to just, is John Dorsey going to enable, him to say whatever he wants and not pose any sort of, not necessarily saying you have to fine him, but being able to make him very much aware of the fact that that doesn't help your team. That only creates more distractions. It's no different than their head coach wearing a Pittsburgh started it t-shirt in his downtime. It's not the fact that he shouldn't be able to wear that or his daughter gave it to her or whatever the backstory is. It's the fact that you got to realize the position you're in. The head coach, quarterback, you're the leaders of that team. You're the ones that everyone in that city, every Browns fan looks to do and say the right thing at all times, good and bad. And I think that's the issue is, Freddie Kitchens and the T-shirt and all that, which is just, it's completely unnecessary. People can be individuals without being idiots with the way they go about handling things. And I think that's the hard part about looking at the way they conduct themselves sometimes is they just don't say the right things when they really need to, at the wrong moment when they need someone to step up and say the right things. They just haven't. So I think if I'm any head coach looking at that job, you really need to feel like you've got to have autonomy. You've got to have John Dorsey on the same page that you've got a culture issue. Because if John Dorsey doesn't realize that, and he's just trying to admit that, look, man, I supply the players talented. They may be lacking some character here and there, but you've got to make it work. I think that you're a head coach that says, yeah, I'm okay then. Like I don't want to deal with that because I also want to have good people and win with good people. And I think there's plenty of examples of that. You can look at the New England Patriots for an example of that. You can look at many of the other organizations that I've kind of thrown out there. Same thing with the New Orleans Saints. Like you don't see that coming from Sean Payton and his group. So there's countless examples, and for whatever reason, the Browns can't seem to get it right of how they want to handle themselves or conduct themselves with their culture.
No, look, the Browns are a mess. I mean, it starts from the top down, and they haven't fixed it. And they need to.
Can I ask Brady one more question?
You do whatever you want.
It just occurred to me. So Brady, obviously, me and Brinson and Breach and Sean do a lot of whinging about how terrible the coaching is week in and week out. As someone who's been in the league and seen coaches in meetings and on the sidelines, have you ever thought to yourself, what is this guy, what is this idiot doing? Why is he doing what he's doing? Or is that more of a media, Twitter fan thing? Or do players look at coaches and go, this guy's a freaking moron, and this is why we're losing all these football games?
No, of course. I mean, you're going to have those arguments and discussions on the sidelines, in meeting rooms afterwards, especially, Monday mornings after when you watch it back. And I think the thing you appreciate most about coaches and the guys you have most respect are the ones that would say, this is a bad call, I put you in a bad position. And that's why that play didn't work. Or this is a bad call, I put you in a bad spot, and you made that play work. And that's why we love you as players. Like those guys who do that, those are the ones that tend to get the most respect, tends to be the ones that are most beloved. And I think when you look at this year, there's a lot of things that I think have played into Baker Mayfield not taking the strides that he's needed to, or this Browns team hasn't. I mean, one, having to play the rest of the season now without Myles Garrett, that's going to hurt you. He's their best player on their roster. Their defense is taking a step back. I think we'd agree, especially since the transition to Greg Williams being their interim head coach last year, and you look at how the defense was playing and really even how the offense was playing. Like they kind of fed off of that attitude from Greg Williams, something that it's not really quite the same with Freddie Kitchens. They bring in Todd Monken. It's a more downfield passing game. I think there's going to be you're going to take more chances. You're going to throw some more interceptions, but you're hoping to throw more touchdowns than interceptions when it's all said and done, being that aggressive. That hasn't been the case for this team, in part because their offensive line play has been bad. And I think they just need more time between Odell and Baker Mayfield in developing that chemistry. But, again, now he's not playing 100%. He's banged up. He needs surgery in the offseason. And it sounds like he doesn't want to be there. So to make matters worse, you're looking at a roster that doesn't really have the type of chemistry that you're really looking for out of a team. So, there's a lot of things that have equated to them not having a ton of success, but I think if you want to be critical of the play calling and some of the decision making, it's fair. And players are definitely like that out there, even on the field. Like I remember at times getting play calls thinking, especially early on in my career, like, am I able to get to something else, or am I going to run this? And if I don't run this, like what's going to happen when I come off the sidelines? Am I going to get a bench? Is something else going to happen? I remember being on a bad football team one year, and the coach had come up and asked me and said, hey, next time you get a one-on-one matchup, I want you to throw this particular guy. And I didn't have a lot of confidence in this guy. So next time I came back, I had press coverage on both sides. I threw to the guy that I favored the matchup. We ended up getting PI. We ended up getting the ball down around the goal line, ended up getting points out of the drive. I came off the sidelines, and he's chewing me out because I didn't throw the guy he wanted me to. And I vividly remember that conversation, thinking to myself, like, that's not in the best interest of this team, but it was in the best interest of us evaluating that player to see if he was going to make our roster, or stay on our roster for the following year. So there's all sorts of things that happen like that. It's a crazy business and crazy world, but to think that like players aren't upset about play calls or frustrated with the play calling, no, that happens all the time.
Yeah, it is fascinating. And I was talking about this with somebody as it relates to the Panthers. There's just so many competing interests, especially later in the season with, whether it's the quarterback, the coaching staff, the general manager, the owner, I mean, that's when you get in a bad spot as a team, is when you got competing interests. Fortunately, this team we got right here. Oh, go ahead, Brady. I know you got something else you want to say.
No, I was just going to say you're right. I mean, you've got a general manager now who's trying to look at the roster, a head coach who might feel like he's on the hot seat and wants to win so he can maintain his job. And so you're putting guys on IR and putting guys in who, they're saying, oh, yeah, you're safe. We want to take a look at these guys, see what they're capable of. And then we come see after week 17 on Black Monday, guys getting fired because they didn't finish strong enough, or they end up, losing in dramatic ways because they've got younger players in there who they're just trying to get some game tape on them and see what they look like. So happens all the time, and it's obviously for teams that have losing records and they're looking on to the next season.